Thank you for joining us for another research roundup. Please hit like and subscribe to hear more news from the Baskin School of Engineering at UC Santa Cruz. Today, Professor of Computational Media Noah Wardrip-Fruin will discuss his forthcoming book, How Pac-Man Eats, available from MIT Press this fall.
Something huge happened in our culture around the time that Pac-Man came out, right? And we could see it in the reception of Pac-Man. Games like Pac-Man had, been in arcades and they'd been popular, but Pac-Man was suddenly, on cereal boxes, on T-shirts, had a TV show, had a hit radio song. So, question is, what happened, right? What changed in games in that period of the late 1970s, early 1980s? And one of the key things that changed is game designers learned a new technique that they're still using today, and I call that technique expansion. Basically, they take one of the fundamental ways that games work, such as the collision of one thing running into another that we saw in games like Pong and we saw in games like Space War, and they figured out how to use that same fundamental operational logic to make a game mean something more. And in this case, something that is now very familiar to us, right? Pac-Man runs into a dot, the dot disappears, we understand that as consuming. We understand that as Pac-Man eating. In the Atari game Adventure, your little dot runs into a sword and suddenly is holding the sword. That's picking things up, right? That fundamental operational logic of collision was expanded to mean more things, and we still see game designers today doing things like using collision to express things about life choices or about body image or about conversation. And so basically the book is trying to talk about what those fundamental things are, how games fundamentally work, how they're put together into playable models so that they can represent things that we're doing in games, and then how they can be used to make games about more and more things.